Alright, in this movie I'm going to go over how to reproduce some text. In the previous one we went into building the logo shape here. I'm going to go into preview so we can see what that looks like. I'll deselect so that we don't have that yellow line running around it. So it was pretty successful. So now we want to zoom in and do some of these letters. And a couple of things we're going to want to do. We're going to want to be faithful to the structure of the characters. In this case it's very curvy. There's not very many straight edges, and when we zoom in close you'll see what I'm talking about. The other thing is we're going to want strokes to be similar in width. Those are the two things that are going to kind of give away a well-built character versus a poorly built character. Finally, the other thing obviously is pen placement, point placement, making sure that you're using smooth points rather than corner points, etc. First thing I'm going to do is just save my artwork, and let's zoom in down on this C. C is kind of a good area to begin with. It's a complex character, but it's got some properties that I think are worth mentioning. When you're building type, I like to use a philosophy where you have north, south, west, and east points. When you work that way, it's pretty easy to structure where you're going to start with the points. So I'm going to start by looking at where's the north part of this type. And again, if you look at this, there's all kinds of gray pixels in here. Remember that anti-aliasing is on here. It's trying to smooth out this character so that when you look at it from a distance, you don't see a hard edge. So I'm going to just kind of come in where the gray is kind of the darkest, right around here, and try to find the top spot. Click, drag out, and I'm holding shift when I first drag out. And that's going to keep these Bezier handles constrained. I just want them to stay horizontal. You'll see in a minute why that's important. And just drag out a handle here. And I also need to switch over from preview to outline mode, so Command Y. Notice that in the title bar it now says outline. Alright, and then I'm going to come in, and right before, if we look at this C, it doesn't really have a sharp corner. It kind of rounds around this corner. One thing I like to do is put in a point before a curve and a point after a curve. And I think about it like driving a car. When you're driving a car and you're approaching a corner, if you want to go around it fairly quickly, the strategy, or safely I should just say, the strategy is to brake before the curve and then accelerate outside of the curve. If you brake through the curve or accelerate in the curve, you're asking for trouble. Same thing here. Notice that I laid down a point before this curve and I drug out a Bezier handle, and then I laid down a point coming out of the curve and put in another Bezier handle. Okay, I'm going to come up to the top of the inner part of the C here, hold down shift, and I'm just concentrating on building this curve. I don't really care what this is going to do. I just want to make a handle that's going to build this part of the curve for me. Then I'm going to come down here and again just kind of look for the far west part of this, which is also dark gray. I'm holding down shift and I'm just dragging straight down. And again, I'm just concentrating on this part of the curve. Same thing down here. And then we'll come through this edge of the C. And don't worry, this looks kind of bad here. We'll just hit that on our second editing pass. Notice that I'm not holding shift at this point. This part of the curve needs to just be controlled at whatever angle it's at, so I'm not worrying about that right now. Alright, I'm going to swing back over here along the bottom, hold down shift, just drag this out till I've got a curve along here that I like. Come out to the far west side. It looks like right around here is appropriate. Just trying to lay down that curve so that it basically comes in through all of this junk. Just kind of trying to split the middle. And then finally, coming back up here at the top, click, drag out. I'm going to just drag that out until this curve. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to have to make an adjustment. So I'm going to just stop it here, and then I'll make a final adjustment in our editing pass. So we set this up initially. Now we can make an editing pass. I'm going to get out the direct selection handle. If I hold down Command, remember it uses whatever the last selection arrow was. In this case it was a black arrow, so I just need to pick the white arrow in this case. And I'm going to just drag this guy out, and I think what I need to do is bring in this Bezier handle. And remember, you can also grab the segment if that would work. So I can click and drag on that, and that makes kind of a live adjustment. I can drag one way or the other, and both of those handles adjust. So whatever works for you in order to build this out. That's a little too weak, so I think I'm going to have to grow it on this side a bit and just bring this in a little bit more. Sometimes that handle adjustment just doesn't work properly because we need to have it grow in a way that's just not working for grabbing the segment. And then I think also I just need to bring this anchor point in a little bit. Alright, good. I'm going to zoom in. You can see that Spotlight activates when you hit Command Space. That's annoying. Apple used that even though Adobe's been using Command Space forever. Alright, now I want to check this out. You'll notice that I have a slight S-curve in here, and that's because this handle's coming on the left side of this segment a little bit, and this handle's on the right side. If we zoom in, you can see that. So I'm just going to make a little adjustment. Now, I think what I'll do is just drag this out a bit and take these guys so that they look. So now I've got kind of a nice C shape. And again, if you look at all this gray, it can be pretty confounding of what you should be doing. I'm just trying to stay in kind of the dark gray path. Look at this, and again, this should be kind of a C shape, so I'm going to make a little adjustment there. Let's see what other parts need adjusting. Oh yeah, the bottom needed adjusting big time. So in this case, I just need to grab this handle. I'm holding down Shift so it stays nice and horizontal and bringing it in a bit. So now it tapers nicely into this little corner. And then it rounds that corner comfortably, comes back the other way. That's how you can build a letter with a pen. Just 2 pass. If I preview this, looks nice and sharp. I'll hide the template layer and I'll click away. The key that you're looking for when you're building one of these shapes is you shouldn't be able to look at something where you've used smooth points and say, I know where the anchor points are. It should look nice and smooth. As I zoom in, I mean, you can have a good idea where maybe the handle's been put in, but there should be no lump or bump that's a dead giveaway. And in this case, it's nice and smooth all the way through there. That's the advantage of using smooth points rather than corner points that have little Bezier handles on them. It's pretty easy to get kind of lazy when you're working and kind of use this hybrid corner point, click with the pen, do something like this. Click, you build a shape, and then you come back and you click this to correct it, and then you build something like this, and then you click this to correct, and you do something like that so that you don't have any control, you don't have to worry about all those smooth points that you're working with. The drag about it is it's not always the most sensible way to work. If I click away and zoom in, notice that this point is visible. Not much, but it's pretty visible. Here's where it comes in, there's where it goes out. Those little lumps and bumps add up, and sure enough, there's the point. So you really don't want to get lazy like that. That it doesn't seem like it'll show up, but people's eyes find those lumps and bumps. So The other way I wanted to show you how to do this letter, let's bring back the template. I'm going to go ahead and delete this letter. I just want to stress that you can do this with the Convert Anchor Point tool and straight segments. So I'm going to build the same letter, laying down the points, same position. This time I'm just going to put in points where they're going to be, rather than trying to put in smooth points at all. I'm also going to flip over to outline mode. It gets pretty easy to see why outline mode is important. You start to lose the design behind the preview. So all I'm doing is I'm just putting in points where they should be. Top north, far west, far south, before a curve, after a curve, bottom of the curve, far west, top of the curve again. Okay, so how is this going to turn into that nice pretty C that we were just building? It's all with Bezier handles. Going to come in with the Convert Anchor Point tool, click on this top point, drag out. I'm only trying to work on this part of the path right now. Click with this point, drag out. I'm just concerned about this part of the path. Click, drag out, and so forth. I'm just kind of building path, and when you're doing it this way, you have to remember that you're going to have another anchor point on the other side, or another Bezier handle on the other side, so you don't want to build the whole curve. Build about half of it with one, half of it with the other. I'm holding down Shift just like I did when I built it with the pen tool. This time I'm concerned with that back curve. Again, I'm just looking at the back curve. There's half. There's the other half. So I'm just clicking and dragging with the Convert Anchor Point tool to get these nice smooth points. And I'm just going to try to build these guys out a little bit. Alright, then that's our second pass. We have to do 3 passes with it this time. Notice that when I hold down Command now, it goes to the last selection tool I had, which was Direct Select, which is terrific. Just drag this out. I think I'm going to encounter probably the same kind of issue I had before. Just need to make a slide adjustment. That looks good. Notice I'm encountering the exact same things. I'm trying to adjust the curves, just making sure that I've got C curves where necessary. I only need S curves if the shape actually looks like an S. There we go. That looks pretty decent. That looks good. That part's good. Need to make a little adjustment in here just like I did before. Hold down Shift, bring that back a little bit. That's good too. There we go. Same shape. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You can choose which way you want to build things. Sometimes people find using this technique helps them learn how the pen tool works, how points work. It's a little less intimidating than trying to figure out the whole thing at once. This is kind of like the training wheels way. As you get comfortable with it, you'll just start using the pen tool and you'll kind of instinctively know where to lay down your points. But this is a good place to start. To finish, I'm going to go ahead and save one more time. I'm going to do a little more complex letter. This A is nice and complex, so I'll walk through that and just show you some different considerations we'll have with this one. Again, I'm going to start with the pen. I'm going to just start at the north point. Click and drag out. And I'm just visualizing this controlling this curve that's coming up. The handle is roughly 1/3 of the segment that I'm going to control. The other handle I put in will be another third, and then there'll be an empty third here on the other edge. So here it is going before the curve. I'm putting in a point at the end of the curve as we go into the straight. Notice that I'm holding down Shift, and that's going to make, as I start to make my pass down here, that's going to make a nice straight line. But I'm not just going to click down here and continue. I could do that, but if I do that, when I make the next point, there's a very good chance that this will show up. If I click down here and drag this out, notice that this point becomes exposed. I'll flip into outline mode so that's less distracting. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is come down here about the same place where I had point before. I'm going to hold down Shift. When I click, that'll ensure that this is vertical to this line. We can see it's a pretty hard vertical here. So I'm going to just hold down Shift, click, and drag out. Now, these two Bezier handles are in a straight line path, so I still end up with a straight line. That's terrific. Why I need them is they're going to help me when I build the smooth curve. The transition from this into the smooth curve will be unnoticeable. Alright, so I'm going to click over here, drag out, and I know that I'm going to need to make an edit here. I'll come back for that. Same thing as before with the bottom of the C. I'm just going to build out a little curve there. Come down to the south side, click, hold down Shift as I build that. Now this is kind of weird. This kind of comes back and goes in another direction. So I'm going to build this guy with a point on this side that's fairly vertical, and then over on this point I'll just have it be at an angle, and that'll take care of that. Come over here to where the south edge is, this guy, come over to the west. Now through here I could try to control this whole curve with a point here and a point up here, and you could probably do it, but sometimes when you run into these long expanses, I play it a little safe and I put in a point that just kind of rides along the center of that. And then I'll have another, notice that it's a smooth point, so ideally it won't be noticeable. And then right before this curve I'll put in another anchor point that's kind of nice and small. And that's kind of a nice C curve. And then I'm going to put in another point on the outside of this. And again, this is where you look at the character and decide how this character is built. If we look at this character, every time there's joints being made, it's a nice curve joint in there rather than having just a hard transition. Obviously, some typefaces you have hard transitions, and that's where you'd come in, you'd click on the point, you'd convert it to a corner point, and then you'd make a sharp transition. But for this, it's very organic, and all of your characters should have kind of this roundness to them. Alright, again, I'll hold down Shift when I come up here, click, I'm going to just make a Bezier handle. Again, these Bezier handles are on the same line, so I just get a straight line here, but the transition is what I'm working for. This is going to make a nice smooth transition up above. Hold down Shift. Now, for this S curve, there's a couple ways you can go. I think what I'll do is I'll lay down a point just kind of in the middle here. Notice that it's an S curve because it kind of bulbs out. So I'm going to just lay down a point here. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom area and just lay down another point. Notice I'm not holding Shift because this has got kind of, again, it's not a full, I don't know how to describe it. It's at an angle. So I'm going to swing around the other side. Just kind of opposite of where that was, and lay in this other point. I'm kind of going against that north, south, east, west thing. Come back and click on the top. Hold down Shift so that I get a smooth point coming out there. And then now I have to do some quick edits. So I'm going to look at this guy. Probably this needs to come in a bit. Looks a little goofy there. That looks pretty good. That actually looks pretty good, except there's a lot of gray in there. So I'm going to edge toward the side of a thicker stroke. I'm holding down Shift though so that this maintains nice vertical. This structure looks pretty good. Another interesting trick, if I hold down Shift and click on this second point, these 2 points should probably be on the same horizontal axis. To get that to work that way, go under Object. I have just those 2 points selected. Object, Path, Average. Just going to choose horizontal. When I do that, it puts them on the same horizontal plane. Now I can move them up slightly and they'll both move together. Notice that they both come up together. That's great. Come in here, look at this shape. That looks pretty good too. And see, this is the advantage of smooth points. When you're working with smooth points, you're not doing a lot of extra edits. You know that you've got the curves that you need. Now this one, I'm just going to extend this a little bit. Comes in here and has a pretty good flare to it. So let's take a look at it in fill land. There it is. We'll get rid of the background. Probably the one area that still needs a little work is this one. I think that if you look away, it has a little bit of a strange lump. And that's one effect that you get by adding a point here, is that there's more chance of having lumps and bumps. So what we might do is just take this. What's happening is this guy is threatening to go past this intersection. Whenever you have that, let me show you an extreme, you get something like this. So instead, I'm going to just try to eyeball this so that this Bezier handle is clearly on the other side of the intersection. And I think if we click away, that looks a little better now. If need be, you can always move this handle too, just up a little bit. And we can crank this around just a little bit too, if you have to. There we go. Alright, so that's the A. Let's get the interior done. Oh, and I have to show the background. I'm going to save my work again. The interior has the same kind of loose joint here, so I'm going to start, why don't we start with the vertical. Click, pull down. I basically want this to kind of run along the same line. Hold down Shift before this curve, drag out a Bezier handle, come out of the curve with another handle, come down to our south end. There we go. Come over to our west. And then this one is small enough that we could control it, I think, with just a handle here. Notice that you have to really crank out that handle though. Obviously when I join it, it's going to look a little funky. Don't worry about that. We're just going to come back with a direct selection, click on this, drag it back so that this is past, again, that it's not intersecting the imaginary line. If you project this, it doesn't intersect that. If it goes across, you start to get really funky looking shapes. So it's not doing that. Looks alright. Gonna extend this just a little bit. There we go. Have that. See how this looks. Pretty good. Alright, so we've got these two shapes. It's all filled in now. I'm going to hold down Command so that I have my selection tool. You can use selection. This is direct selection. You can use selection or direct selection here. Click on the interior, hold down Shift, click on the exterior, go under Object, Compound Path, Make. remember, compound paths tell Illustrator that this shape needs more than one outline to define it. It's like a donut. Donuts have windows in them. Anything that has a window is a compound path. You could also, as a student pointed out, you could also go into Pathfinder and you could use this first button here. I'm sorry, not the first one. You'd use subtract. When you do that, there's a slight difference. If we look at this layer, it creates what's called a compound shape. Compound shape has two paths in it that still have a layering order. Now, if you click Option when you click on that, or you press Expand after you've done that, it turns it into a compound path. In fact, let me see if I can adjust this so that we can see that it actually says compound path in there. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to screw around with my dock because I've got too much stuff in here. But trust me, it's compound path because now everything is on actually one part of the layer. Compound paths are important when we get to clipping masks and other things where you need just one shape. So remember, compound path, you can get there either by option clicking on this guy or under Object, Compound Path. Notice I can release that here and make it again through the menu. Same way. One or the other, doesn't matter. Now, this is preferable, obviously, than just filling this with white, because then we can have a background object. And we can actually see that object behind or through this shape. So always make, when you're doing text or anything that has a window, always make a true window in Illustrator by making a compound path. I think this covers the pen tool pretty thoroughly. After you've watched these two videos, the one on making the mark and then the one on text, you should have some good strategies of how to use the pen, when not to use the pen, when to use Pathfinder or compound paths or rectangles and scissors or the knife tool to create more complex shapes. With the pen tool in Illustrator, you can create any silhouette. I guarantee it. You can make any type of shape with the tools provided there. So hopefully at this point you feel pretty comfortable and you feel like you can maybe start approaching this. Remember a couple of key things. The hardest thing to do when you're getting started with this is to figure out where to put in the points. So when available, either do that north, south, east, west thing, or lay down a point before a major curve and then after a major curve. Let the Bezier handles build the curve for you. So again, if I click on this shape, notice that I have a Bezier handle defining this side of the curve, Bezier handle defining this side of the curve. And this is appropriate because the curve changes over on this side. It's tight here, it loosens up here. So this is a good place to have Bezier handles because the curve is different. So you have the Bezier handles in before the curve, after the curve. That's one strategy. Remember to hold down Shift, you'll get verticals. Remember to make smooth points, even if you're just making a vertical, because when you make the transition to a curve, again, just check down here. You can't see it. If I click away, you don't have any idea where that anchor point is, and that's because of that smooth point transitioning a vertical into that nice little curve at the bottom. If you follow that strategy, people won't be able to see where your anchor points are, and that's what you're shooting for. When I grade your work, that's what I'll be looking for. I'll actually just come through and count how many little bumps and lumps I see in the lettering. So I hope this gives you an idea of the setup. By the way, when you're looking at this 8, instead of doing one exterior shape and 2 interior shapes, consider making an S. In fact, you could probably option copy this over to get started at least. Make this shape just the left side, the true S, and then come in and make another reverse S and try using Pathfinder to unite those guys together. you might actually come up with a more unique shape in here. And then again, as your letters pass through this middle point, you'll have really strong continuity from one side to the other because it's actually just two S's joined together. Anyway, something to consider as you're working on this exercise. I hope you find this helpful.